has you feeling like you're stuck in a cave, listen to what Gary learned inside his. This is GPS, God, People, Stories. It's an outreach of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. I'm Phil Fleischman.
And I'm Jim Kirkland. Gary says all of us retreat into a cave of some kind at one time or another, all in the pursuit to try to get away from something we don't like in our lives. And a little later in this episode, you'll hear Billy Graham explain that what you might be doing is actually trying to run away from God.
He sees that you're trying to run and flee, but he loves you, and he has a plan for your life if you'll only turn and repent.
You can learn more about God's love for you and his plan for your life right now at findpeacewithgod.net. That's findpeacewithgod.net. We also want to remind you about our prayer line. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thousands of people are calling in with prayer requests, spiritual questions, or simply to talk to somebody. And if you find yourself in need in any of those categories, we'd love to talk with you. The number is 888-388-2683. You didn't catch that number, it's in the show notes. And you can call anytime you like, even in the middle of the night. Please don't hesitate to call if you need prayer.
GPS.
God.
People. Stories.
I was born here in Rochester, New York.
Gary Bykirk had his first brush with death at a very young age.
It was after dinner one day that I left the table. I was 18 months old and went up the stairs, and right at the top of the stairs, there was a window overlooking the outside. I opened up the window and fell out of the 2-story window, landed on a blacktop driveway, fractured my skull. I spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. My father, who was a Catholic, had last rites given to me because they thought I wasn't going to make it. But there was someone on the side, my cousin, who was about 10 years old at the time. She was praying for me. Her name was Jan. And it was really quite a miracle that I survived it.
Gary's cousin Jan will come back into the story a little later. But Gary's next traumatic experience happened when he was just in kindergarten. His mother shared some heartbreaking news when he got home from school one day.
Came home from school and she told me that we were going to have to move because my dad had sold the house and had left. So he left being a part of our life when I was about 4 or 5 years old.
In spite of that loss, Gary says he still had a good childhood, thanks to the love of the rest of his family, including a tight-knit group of aunts, uncles, and cousins. Gary grew up, graduated from high school, and followed his girlfriend to college.
For me, my future was set. She was going to be in my life for the rest of my life. So we'd gone off to college together here up in upstate New York, State University of New York at Brockport. And we were there for probably a month, 2 months, and she broke up with me. And so there I was in college and not really wanting to be there. But that was a pretty traumatic experience for me. I had finished reading a book called The Green Berets, and I said, I think I'm going to go into Green Berets. I'm going to come back to Brockport here. I want to come back in my uniform with a green beret on and show this girl what she gave up, what she's missing in her life. So I went into the Army. I did go down and enlist for the Green Berets.
A strong sense of independence and a can-do attitude had defined Gary from the time he was a kid, and he loved a challenge. He pushed through basic training, infantry training, and jump school. Then he was accepted into Special Forces training and headed down to Fort Bragg in North Carolina.
I went through a phase 1, which now they call a selection course, but it was a course designed to just weed you out. I believe it was about 8 weeks of just 24/7 intensive emotional, physical kinds of experiences, many of which are illegal nowadays.
He succeeded once again, and Gary decided he wanted to become a medic. Then an incident off base almost destroyed his dreams and could have even killed him.
One of the days that I had off, I went down to Fayetteville, and the last thing I can remember is going out to the car and putting a coin in the meter so I wouldn't get a ticket. The next thing I remember, I woke up and I was aching, I was hurting, I couldn't hardly move, and I looked over my head and I saw my team sergeant behind bars, and I said, "What are you doing behind bars, Sarge?" And he said, "I'm not behind bars, Gary, you are." He said, you really did it this time. And I said, what did I do? And he said, well, from what I can get from the police report, you left the bar, tried to come back to Fort Bragg. You bounced off a couple parked cars. The Fayetteville police came after you. You took off, went out on the Interstate 95, and the North Carolina state troopers got in the chase. They ran you off the road. You came out of your car with a billy club that I always carried underneath my seat and tried to attack the state troopers. He said they beat you up really badly, and right now you're facing charges of driving while intoxicated, hit and run, assault with a deadly weapon.
Gary hired a lawyer and started telling him what had happened.
After about 30 seconds, he just said, you can stop right there. I've heard this 100 times from you guys in Special Forces. He said, how quick can you get yourself out of the country? And I said, well, you're on alert to go to Mali, Africa. And he said, when? And I said, about 6 months. And he said, not good enough. You got to get yourself out of the country within 30 days. Can you do that? And I said, well, I guess so. So then the way that I could do that was to go to the reenlistment office, and I reenlisted for Vietnam. When I reenlisted, they promoted me to E4, gave me $600 as a reenlistment bonus. I went back to my lawyer, and my lawyer said, great. When we go to court, just say guilty, Your Honor, when I tell you to say it. I said, okay. We went to court. The judge had a lot of legal jargon that he went through, and I heard him say, how do you plead? I looked at my lawyer. My lawyer nodded his head, and I said, guilty, Your Honor. And he said, okay, I find you guilty of reckless driving. Your fine is $100. So apparently my lawyer had talked to the DA, and they had all those charges reduced, said he's going to be going to Vietnam, show him some grace. So I got all the charges dropped, and I was found guilty of reckless driving, fined $100. And as we were leaving, my lawyer said, oh, yeah, by the way, my fee's $500. So there went my $600 reenlistment bonus. But I was on my way to Vietnam as an E4, a specialist fourth class.
Gary had completed a year and a half of intensive medical training before his run-in with the police knocked him off course. In Vietnam, an older medic saw something in him and helped him get back on track. Gary's next stop was Dak Chi Ang. It's home to a group of indigenous people called the Montagnard, who were allies of the American troops.
I went to Dak Chi Ang, which was a small camp. It was about 5 miles from the Laotian border and the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was right in the middle of the jungles. When we got to that jungle camp, I was looking for somebody that could be my mentor. I picked a 15-year-old Montagnard boy. His name was Deo. And I remember saying to him, Deo, you got to help me learn how to survive here in the jungle. I said, because I don't like snakes and I'm afraid of tigers. You got to help me learn how to survive out here.
Deo laughed and told his American friend that he needed to learn how to live, not just survive. From that time on, the two of them shared a special bond.